live, so I'm going to go live, and now everybody should see me. They changed this. I'm live. This is really great. I can start over. I had already started this. That's so funny. Welcome everyone. I can do my whole intro again because I didn't push the button to go live. That's really funny. But welcome everyone. So now that I'm live, I will ask you, can you all hear me? Can you all see me? Wait. This is so funny. I was already in the middle of my whole introduction. So the image that you saw was already part of that. But welcome everyone. I think you weren't waiting for that webpage. You were waiting to see my face. And welcome all. Can you all hear me? Can you all see me? And then I'll explain what that website was. Hey everyone. So welcome to this beta of Controlled Substance Live. Yes, awesome. Such a woofy. You can hear me. This is really great. It's so funny because I just did this whole bit and I'm going to do it again. Welcome everybody to Controlled Substance Live beta. It's a beta because I'm still testing out a whole bunch of things, and leading up to even this live, it's so much tweaking. But the general idea for this show is to have in the future more of a live show where I can talk to people, show you things, do research, all sort of live, and have interaction with you guys, and then not have all this editing work afterwards that I need to do. And it's sort of a technical challenge to get everything working. So that's why we've done these lives this year, I think, for like 3 times. Most recently about the legalization of cannabis in the United States. And now what we're adding this time is a guest. We have a guest, Gjalt-Jorn Peters from the Open University here in the Netherlands is going to be here to talk about the legalization of MDMA, and which is really great. So I'm trying to up the sort of like technological challenge each time I do this, so that this machine starts working more, and I can do this. Make this really a monthly endeavor. I think I'm still at 1 a month right now, so that's good, and I still want to keep it at one a month, and then scale up from there eventually, and talk about everything sort of that interests me over the next couple of years. So that's the idea. That's the ambition. Welcome to this discussion about the possible legalization of MDMA. I think that in the past few years we've heard a lot about the legalization of cannabis, and sometimes I even see the framing of the war on drugs in light of the legalization of cannabis, like the war on drugs is waning because the legalization of cannabis is on the march. And although it's of course a really good sign that things like that are happening, it is not a done deal, of course, that if you legalize one drug that you will legalize them all. I want to show you some of the discussion that has been popping up over here, but first just a couple of the quick questions over here. Thank you, by the way, all for joining. Armin, will this be uploaded? Yes, this is automatically uploaded to YouTube. That's the idea. So once I do this live, I can even, I think, cut certain parts out of it later, but it's really nice for me to just directly stream this to YouTube. So in the past few years, there's been some discussion here in the Netherlands about the legalization of MDMA. Sometimes it was just a political stunt, like this ecstasy shop in Amsterdam. This happened a few years ago, 2015. This was mostly by the youth wing of a political organization, the Democrats 66 in the Netherlands, trying to start this discussion, which is something that I myself also did for a publication called The Correspondent. I wrote basically a piece saying, buying ecstasy in a store, this step-by-step guide will do it. It's basically a sort of manual for how to responsibly legalize MDMA if you would want to put it in a store. But this discussion is much broader and much deeper, and that's why today we're going to talk to somebody from this website. These are the results for a think tank, the MDMA Think Tank Gjalt-Jorn has to summarize for this for me. What was it again? It was the MDMA. We did. There's a really good Dutch name, but not a good English name. The MDMA Think Tank group. The MDMA Policy Think Tank. There we go. I did write it down. I have my notes here. Since this is all live, I have to sort of go around all this. So I have to kind of like flip from one side to the other. But we're going to have Gjalt-Jorn Peters here. I think I would like to welcome him actually to the show now. And then after that, we're also going to talk about, we're going to see some stuff from Rick Dublin, who I interviewed more than a year ago. This was supposed to be part of a longer sort of documentary that might still one day come out, but the pandemic prevented me from ever doing sort of like the second part of the interview. So I thought it would be nice to maybe show some snippets from my conversation with him. So without that further ado, I'm going to try to get Gjalt-Jorn in here. Gjalt, can you unmute yourself? That's step one, I think. And then I will see if we can hear you. At least I can see you.
Excellent.
Here's Gjalt-Jorn. And can you say hi?
Hi.
Hi. Hey, great to have you here, Gjalt. Really cool. I just would love a confirmation from everybody watching if you can also hear Gjalt-Jorn, and then we'll just start the conversation. And yeah. I see some comments in the chat, and which is good. Well, we're going to come to the chat later on to answer questions. First, Gjalt-Jorn, can you just explain to me what it is you tried to do? You are from the MDMA Policy Think Tank, and you tried to sort of come up with all the sort of different techniques that you could take to legalize or illegalize MDMA and see what that would do to health and crime. Is that sort of like an accurate description of what you did?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Okay, well then the interview is done. No, okay, so sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, basically we, at least those of us who initiated this, kind of got a bit frustrated by the fact that these discussions tend to polarize quite quickly. People often have quite strong feelings, quite strong ideas, a priori ideas, that prevents actually looking at the issue kind of objectively. So what we try to do is think about a way to try to take as much of that bias and prejudice out of the discussion as possible. And yeah, we did that by looking at the kind of, we call those criteria, the kind of outcomes you want as a society, and then thinking about what the buttons are that you can play with as a government.
With a whole group of people?
Yeah, we had 18 experts from lots of different backgrounds.
Oh, yeah. So how does this work? So if you basically have 18 experts from different perspectives, all looking at the sort of same questions to see what the best option is, because you're trying to predict the future in a sort of way as well, right? Yeah.
I mean, we started in 2019, and we may have missed the pandemic, but for the rest, in terms of predicting the future, it went quite well. Now, we, as I said, we kind of broke down potential policy around MDMA into different kind of policy instruments that you have as a government. And then these experts looked at the effects of each of those policy instruments on all those criteria we defined. So in terms of criteria or outcomes, you can think about like crime, for example, organized crime or petty crime, or user health, or potential positive or negative social effects. So all those different things that might play a role in your decisions as a society. Yeah,
exactly. And you said that you were a little bit tired with the discussion how it was. What do you usually see? Where is the discussion around sort of MDMA policy right now, and also a little bit politically? Is there anything you can say about that?
Yeah. Currently, the current government, which we'll have elections soon, but the current government is not necessarily a big fan of harm reduction in general, but especially of the idea of MDMA or legalization. So the current discourse is pretty much like intensifying the war on drugs. And that also, usually when people publish, when like in the media, there's something about the problems related to drug use, the most common response is, oh, so we need to be more repressive, basically.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in terms of policy, but more money for the police.
Forbid it. We have to be more repressive, or we have to finally enact the law that's supposed to.
Yeah.
Or even when it's a new drug, we have to make it forbidden. If it's already forbidden, they say we have to, I don't know, enact the laws better, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's a problem because it's partly, and it is of course partly ideological. If you have a certain religion, and that religion, you think that religion states that any substance use or non-alcohol substance use is by definition bad, then of course you might not want to have a discussion about any potential positive effect. So it is partly ideological, but because it is also a political matter, I think that scientific evidence should play a role at some point. And that doesn't really...
What a controversial statement, Gjalt-Jorn. Evidence should play some role in policy.
Tragically so, yes.
No, but it's true. I think one of the things that makes MDMA, I don't know, the discussion about the legalization of MDMA doesn't seem to play such big of a role in the rest of the world. Maybe in the United States, in the scientific community, in the health community, maybe. But in general political discussions, you don't hear it this often. What I thought was maybe also a roadblock is that incidents do happen with MDMA, and that it is not hard to find loved ones from people who did not survive their night on illegal MDMA in a uncontrolled setting, so to speak. There's an emotional element to the discussion as well. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I think that all these things have emotional elements. I mean, I think even discussions about, I don't know, car ownership and stuff like that, for some people have emotional elements. That's inevitable, I think.
Yeah.
The point is that exactly because you have emotional elements to it, I think that in these discussions you should try to find ways to not necessarily take those out of the equation, but prevent them from dominating the whole discussion. Yeah. And this was our attempt to contribute to that in a way.
Yeah.
Because of course.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thanks also everyone in the comments, because there were some issues with your audio, my audio, but that seems to be solved now, so that's really good. Thanks for the intro, Gjalt-Jorn. I think it would be cool to maybe now listen to Rick Dublin. A couple of things. I want to rewind a little bit to. My girlfriend is calling. That's an instant distraction. That's an instant distraction. To when MDMA was first made illegal, which was in the 80s, and kind of interesting how that happened back then. When I studied the illegalization, so when I studied the war on drugs over the past century, I would often bump into these sort of weird stories at the beginning of when any sort of type of drug was made illegal. So whether it was cannabis at the UN in the 30s, or in the 20s, that was a weird process. LSD in the Netherlands was done because somebody found a note that they were going to give LSD to the horses of the Queen. And then also emergency scheduling of LSD in the Netherlands. But when it comes to MDMA, there is a Rick Dublin from MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelics Research, was so directly involved in trying to stop the illegalization of MDMA because he knew that so many therapists were using it, that he has this really deep-lying knowledge of how step-by-step the DEA was trying to make MDMA illegal. And it again is a weird story, and so I just wanted to share that, so we're going to open that up and switch it over here. Wait. Trying to get this to the right screen. That's funny.
In the early '84 is when I started this new nonprofit before MAPS.
Yes, okay, great. VLC didn't want to move to the other screen. Here we go.
In the early '84 is when I started this new nonprofit before MAPS to gather all this energy, to provide a vehicle for people to make donations, for nonprofit donations, to support the eventual lawsuit against the DEA. And then we did a secret safety study with MDMA that we kept secret to reveal to the hearing once the DEA moved. So we had some data that we would have a hard time gathering later. But it's called an administrative law judge lawsuit. So what that means is administrative law judges, there's a separate group of them. They're inserted into different agencies of the federal government, and they're to mediate disputes between people in the agency.
Oh, okay.
But they don't have the power to compel. They have the power to make recommendations, but not to compel. But while the hearing is going on, there's starting to be various media accounts about here these people that are challenging the DEA. And we had in the Washington Post an article by one of the rabbis was quoted as saying that MDMA was like the Sabbath. And then one of the monks, Brother David Steindl-Rast, was quoted in Newsweek saying that MDMA gives you the same enlightened attitude that a monk would spend his whole life trying to cultivate in meditation. So we were winning in the court of public opinion. Yeah. We were winning in the court with all of our testimony, and that's where the DEA freaked out and emergency scheduled MDMA in 1985. So it took a couple times. We won twice in the appeals court, and eventually the DEA lawyers figured out how to criminalize MDMA. And we knew that they were going to resist. So even before all this happened, is '86 in April is when I started MAPS as a basically nonprofit pharmaceutical company to take MDMA through the system. Later it turned out that the DEA did not have the authority to emergency schedule drugs. So there was this period of time where Congress had given the authority to the Attorney General, but the Attorney General had never subdelegated the authority to the DEA below. Really? Yeah. So it's just, they could have done that in one paragraph in the Federal Register, but they didn't do that. And so there was a period of about a year where everybody who got busted got free because...
Oh, yeah?
And what I like about it, the irony of it, is that the first effort by the DEA to criminalize MDMA was itself a crime.
Oh, yeah?
They didn't, nobody went to jail, none of the DEA people went to jail.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately, but they exceeded their authority and did stuff that was illegal, that unlawful.
Yeah. So there was a super weird story about basically the DEA back in the 80s trying to do everything within its power and outside of its power.
Early '84 is when I started.
To make MDMA illegal, which is it's really sort of like a strange story. And I think Gjalt-Jorn, you were not able to hear this quote maybe because I couldn't relay it to you that quickly. Otherwise, I had to take it off the screen. What he basically said is that the DEA has tried to emergency schedule MDMA multiple times. He later added in the interview that what they used in court, sort of, was 8 emergency room visits. So 8 people had gone to the emergency room, and that sort of, like with that in their hand, they went to the courts to try to make MDMA illegal, and succeeded. Then later it turns out that the whole procedure through which it was done was illegal. So everybody who got busted in that first year got out, didn't get any sort of punishment, and then they fixed whatever that needed to be fixed. And in the discussion about the legalization of MDMA, I think it's very often it's very important to understand that the sort of market that we have for it now is a created market, sort of like this was almost one could say a market by choice, so to speak, not out of maybe like because they knew the discussion was never so deep or widespread that this was all based on factual knowledge or that they would actually know what was going to happen. It was just like we don't like this drug needs to go, we need to make it illegal. That is almost a summary of what you said earlier, right? About how we still currently look at MDMA.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for some reason there's very little, almost interest, it seems, in what the different effects might be of different choices you can make.
Yeah, exactly. You did think about all these different choices. Like you have a long list of a new market that we can create for MDMA. Maybe if you start looking for a good example that you can show us, I'm just going to tell a little bit about like what sort of, just an introduction to models, like what these models actually are and what we're going to look at. And then we'll you can share your screen after that, and then we'll just kind of dive into what you guys found out. Right now, if you look at sort of like how all these different drugs exist, it differs from country to country because their legal status is constantly different. So I think that the Netherlands, where we both live, is really a laboratory when it comes to drug policy, because we have this weird coffee shop system for weed where growing and producing it is illegal, yet selling it in the front shop is allowed. Then we have something like magic mushrooms. Well, the magic mushrooms specifically are forbidden, but the sclerotia, basically just same organism, different part, are allowed. So we have legal psilocybin containing products throughout the whole chain, from top to bottom, which is very interesting. Then we have decriminalization for personal use of all these different illegal drugs like MDMA and cocaine. So that means that if you have it in lower quantities, police will let you go as an official policy, sort of. That's depending if you have less than 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 pills, depending on from which municipality to which municipality. Yes, by all means, add something.
This is not my expertise, but I think it's not decriminalized. I think it's more like this tolerance, this weird tolerance condone thing, that it's actually still just illegal, just like cannabis. Selling cannabis in coffee shops is also still illegal. It's just some kind of weird agreement to not enforce it.
It is, yeah. The beautiful Dutch word richtlijn. It basically what officially has happened in the Netherlands is that there is a official policy note from the public prosecutor that the public prosecutor will not enforce the law if these sets of guidelines are met. That's what it is for cannabis. When it comes to other drugs, it is individual municipalities setting sort of the bar for non-enforcement for personal possession. So it sort of depends from which drug to which drug, and depends from which place to which place. Generally saying, the Netherlands obeys international drug treaties in general, so that means that here in the Netherlands, drugs are as illegal as anywhere else. You're right. Yeah. You're still right. There's just all these weird policy changes that would make it a little bit differently. And I wanted to, so that's the whole illegal market, but I kind of wanted to touch also on the medicinal market. So what Rick Doblin has been fighting for is the medical acceptance of MDMA. So Rick Doblin has created this organization that on one hand wants to scientifically study psychedelics, and they include MDMA with this, to normalize the conversation about psychedelics and MDMA, therefore providing people with different stories, more positive stories about these substances, so that you can change the more general large conversation about it. And it made me think of something like Valium, where Valium nowadays is, I cannot, here in Holland, I cannot just go to a store and ask for Valium. I have to get it through a doctor, like it can be a psychologist, psychiatrist, or just your general practitioner for panic attacks or fear of flying or stuff like that. And I think the stigma on using Valium for stuff like that is, I wouldn't say non-existent, but you know, close to non-existent. Wouldn't you agree? Like Valium is a very generally accepted sort of medication, right?
The degree of stigmatization depends more on the use. Like if you use it for some kind of psychopathology, you have the mental health stigma, but it's more that than the Valium, I think. And if you use it for something else, then it's probably less stigmatized.
Yeah, right. And I think that maybe if I hear Rick talk about the future of MDMA, I often think that, okay, maybe his highest ambition is to get it to a point where Valium is right now, where if you can use it in psychiatry and psychology for whatever purpose you need, then you can also give it to people to take it back home if they really need it, and setting up at least a legal production and some sort of legal access through a medical way. You looked at more options, right? So I just wanted to put that out there because I think it's important to understand like what sort of models there are for legalization in the future. And then, so where do you guys fit in? That's where does your whole program fit in? And please show us also how it works.
Yeah. We basically, well, I can start basically by sharing my screen, because then you can see the different options that we compared.
Yep. Also want to invite some people. If you have questions, you can throw them in the chat. So
let me see. Apparently, I have options: your entire screen, a window, or a tab. So let's see whether your entire screen allows me to choose which screen. Ah, yes, excellent.
Yeah. Here it comes.
There we go. Yeah. So let's wait until it's there.
Yeah, it's
then
here.
Maybe you should check. Okay, so and I guess if you see it, then other people see it as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. So if you can also read it at the bottom here, you see what are the policy models that we looked at. We have something called highest possible scores, something called lowest possible scores. And your question was actually about the ones in the middle. Basically, what kind of potential models for legalization did we look at? The scoring of the experts, so basically the potential effects that we estimated, were all scored compared to the Dutch situation. So that means that implicitly, the current status quo in the Netherlands is also a model we compared. But it's implicitly here because the scores that you see are all comparison to this current Dutch status quo. So we formulated one model called the repression model, which is basically full-on prohibition.
Full-on prohibition. So basically, you tried to calculate what happens if you would lay down the law in the Netherlands.
Yeah, so if we would, for example, stop with this weird guideline condoning tolerance thing, and user quantities are actually just illegal, and you just go to jail if you are caught with half a pill.
Oh, what would happen? What does the model say?
Yeah, so we had like 27 different outcomes that we looked at, but they were clustered in clusters, which you see here at the top. So one of them was use. So how many people use, how much do they use, how frequently do they use? That's the dark purple bar. Then we have user health, which I guess speaks for itself. Crime, financial costs and benefits, so tax income, but also costs of like cleaning up environmental damage, stuff like that. International politics, because as you said, you are in a number of treaties as a country. So if you decide to legalize MDMA, how do you deal with this? Environmental protection. In the Netherlands, we have a lot of MDMA production. And since that's illegal, there's no policy, no guidelines on how to get rid of your waste. So that's, as one does apparently, usually dumped in forests. And then the last cluster of outcomes were the ideological values. Those were like basically whether a certain policy is consistent with either conservative or liberal views. And as you see, that doesn't actually come back anywhere because we decided to weigh it at zero. We decided as a think tank to not have any ideological ideas. So the effects ideologically, whether something was conservative or liberal. Yep. Okay, so those are.
I do want to add one thing. So you did this with a group of experts who all gave their opinion on it, and this included police, right? So there's health workers, policy experts, police members. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
a broad group of people, so to speak, that came to which conclusion?
Yeah, exactly. And then, but here you see how these different models score on all these clusters of outcomes. So you see a repression model would have a very negative effect compared to the status quo in the Netherlands on the health of the users of MDMA.
And hardly any effect on
crime.
Anything, on crime or anything else. So laying down the law, according to all these experts, basically in your model shows, okay, this would be really bad for user health, but hardly do anything else except, maybe it costs money and gives a better environmental protection. That's what it basically then says. Yeah, and so I'm cutting short, but did your research also show then which model would work the best?
Yes, it did, because you see the scores here. So basically, the nice thing about what we did, because we didn't actually score the models, we scored those policy instruments. So you looked at different. For example, advertising. Is advertising allowed or is advertising illegal or only business to business? And then you look at the effect of all those options within advertising on all those different outcomes. Because we scored like that, you can also calculate what the best choice is. because you can just, decide the total score for any of the options, and then pick the best option for all those policy instruments. Mm-hmm. Forgive my dog; he wants to go.
Oh, it's a dog.
Yeah. But I informed my girlfriend that she can't enter, so that's why the dog is stuck here in the office.
Girlfriends, yeah.
So basically, the model kind of gives you the best choice for all of those policy instruments that we have. So that's this thing, the highest possible scores. And of course, that can be completely nonsensical because the model doesn't care. So it's very possible that he says selling MDMA is illegal, and if you sell MDMA, you have to have an age limit, which of course can't be part of the same policy. Mm-hmm. But the model doesn't. So that's the highest possible scores. The lowest possible scores is the opposite. You just take the worst performing option. Then the X-shop model is kind of what you get if you take the highest possible scores. But
I do have a question about the highest possible scores, because I think what I was hinting at is that, so I kind of want to know what any legal model would sort of do. And you say highest possible scores, but that feels almost like, is that just the highest scores it reached, or do we now? Can you say something about which policy instruments that should be under the highest possible scores? Like, what is the model that sort of comes out as the most ideal model?
Yeah. So if you look at the highest possible scores model, then here you see how it scores on the different outcomes. As I said,
can you read them, because I think it's too small for us to really see. So
basically. Well, I would have to read all of them, which is probably not
the highest. I think the biggest conclusions that. So if you.
So the positive score that you get in the highest scoring model is that you get the most points because you have good quality about good information about MDMA. You can inform users well about the quality and the contents, because of course, if you legalize, then you know the quality, you can have quality control, etc.
And there will be some sort of maybe you'll get some, instead of having to go on the internet to find your information, you will just find it in a little booklet that comes with it, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And you know that it's actually accurate.
Yeah.
And you get the highest score in the crime cluster because organized crime decreases quite a lot.
Is that something that everybody sort of agreed on? That if you that yes, crime will drop when you legalize drugs?
Yeah, yes and no, because you have several of these crime things. For example, the effect on international trafficking was quite minimal. So it's not the case that all crime drops. It depends on what you're looking at. Mm-hmm. We scored these on a very kind of like atomic, tiny level. We looked at all these instruments, for example, possession, whether packaging, whether there are any restrictions for packaging, whether advertising is allowed, whether there's an age limit, all those different instruments that you have as a government, and each instrument had several options, and then we scored the effect of every option on all those outcomes. So on those scores, the think tank experts all agreed. We actually scored people's confidences about those scores afterwards, and those were generally quite high. However, the conclusion, not all the organizations, not all the people who scored agreed with the conclusions.
Mm-hmm. Which
is a bit odd, but it might also, reflect the fact that the debate has kind of, polarized, and it's not always about.
You think it does? That it has polarized into a group that wants to and doesn't want to? Because I feel that even saying things like these, like how it should look like, it advances the discussion, so that's good. And I think the more we have the discussion, the better. But it also seems to not, I don't know, be talking into a brick wall sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's sometimes, and I think also, I'm a researcher and not a politician for a reason. I assume that politics is simply not always even about getting the best outcome, let alone always looking seriously at evidence.
Yeah.
So I guess that polarizing the discussion can be instrumental to some parties.
Yeah.
In itself.
Yeah. I want to go to another quote by Rick Doblin, and people are asking where to find the paper, which is also a good question. Maybe you have a link you can send me in Google Meet. And
there's a basic. I can also tell people because we.
Oh, that's also nice. Yes, sure.
It's basically, you can go to mdmapolicy.com, which will show you an English language website.
One
Dutch
word?
language website.
Okay, yeah.
So that's not ideal for non-Dutch people. But we also have ndmapolicy.com/results.
/results. Because I'm
And
also
that-
going to a GitLab. The whole thing is also online, right? That's the...
Yeah. So if you go to MDMA Policy/results, you basically end up with the document I'm looking at right now, which has all these results.
MDMApolicy.com/results.
Yeah.
I'm doing it live. Ah, yeah. Okay. And so you have to wait, right? Because it says this HTML file is about 65
It's huge.
megabytes large. Yeah.
But it's already loaded here, so I'm showing now the page that you end up at.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm switching screens because I kind of wanted to show my viewers one thing. A lot of people know the David Nutt ranking of drug graph. I think a lot of people who are interested in the legalization of drugs to end the war on drugs know this type of result. It's how dangerous certain drugs are, basically ranked by how toxic they are, how addictive they are, how much crime their business, their illegal business actually causes. And I just want to open the. There we go. And so maybe people have seen this, and this was made in the same type of way with a group of experts. So this became really important, sort of as a policy tool or as a data tool for people to say, see, we are doing our drug laws completely wrong because alcohol seems to be the most dangerous drug, and heroin, crack cocaine follow after, and things like. Well, we'll scroll all the way to the right. Where's ecstasy? Here's MDMA. Over here, on the right, are ecstasy, LSD, and mushrooms. And then cannabis, I think, is scoring somewhere in the middle. And it shows us very visually that, our drug laws are kind of weird, sort of.
So at least they're not based on damage, not based on the things that were scored there.
Exactly. They're not based on. That should be kind of like if you think from first principles, so to speak, and I like first principles thinking. That you just take the whatever is most dangerous, and you have the strictest measures for the most dangerous thing, and vice versa. But instead, alcohol is in the supermarket.
But it's also. You wouldn't necessarily. I mean, I agree with the intuitive appeal of being stricter when something is more dangerous. But at the same time, you have of course, the phenomenon that the stricter you are, the less people have access to it, for example. So therefore, the more they will use it in settings you no longer control.
Oh yeah. So yeah, if it's hard to get, like alcohol when under 21 in the US, people will start drinking anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if it's really expensive, people will start creating their own, producing their own alcohol, etc. So, true. I mean, I think it is complicated, and health doesn't necessarily, depending on somebody's ideological views, have to be the main driver. The point, of course, is that,
sorry, I'm also half reading the chat. This is all part of the beta. Even every interruption I make, my dear Gjalt-Jorn, is just me trying to figure out how to handle 5 screens at the same time. But we got a question in the chat, which is a good one. What would, according to us, be the most relevant and convincing reason to legalize MDMA? I have an answer on that, but maybe you can judge from the model. Is that something you can judge from? What did people say, or what did? Is there anything to say about that?
Then, basically, the benefits that you get on health and crime are definitely the best reasons to legalize MDMA. I think that basically, because that's about evidence and more theory, that might not always be the most persuasive argument in debates or discussions. So there I would rather stick to the fact that if people think MDMA is not very dangerous, and given the fact that it's associated to a lot of crime, it would just make sense to legalize it. If people think MDMA is very dangerous, then it would definitely make sense to legalize it, because then you, as a government, you don't want to give control to, well, give it up to anybody, let alone the criminal system.
Which is why, in the end, they are giving out heroin to long-term addicts here in the Netherlands to sort of do that, right? So, okay, we know that heroin is a really terrible drug to be addicted to. Therefore, we're giving it away for free with taxpayer money in order to help people. Although MDMA is not at that level, I feel that MDMA can be really good for therapy, but also just very good for just hedonism or self-healing. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, quite a lot of, well, I don't know how much, but a non-trivial amount of substance use is self-medication.
Yeah.
And MDMA could definitely have a lot of functions there.
Yeah, and so to answer this question is difficult, but I think that so Jochem, if I think one can say that there are convincing arguments for people who look at this rationally, and then there's sort of effective arguments that do well politically, and they are two different realities. One is reality, and the other is political reality, and I think that Rick Doblin, and this is a really beautiful bridge to back to Rick Doblin. Rick Doblin basically has said that an effective way to approach this is to sort of. So he is giving therapy to people with MDMA, and he's supporting people who give therapy to patients with MDMA. Therefore, these people will come out of these experiences. The numbers show large part cured or at least very well helped by these therapies. And these stories being broadcast on everything from Netflix to congressional hearings and all that stuff will change the narrative around MDMA so that the narrative is not singular anymore. It is not a one-dimensional narrative anymore. And he says, just look at what happened to cannabis. That's exactly how it went. First, medical cannabis became accepted in the United States before people felt comfortable voting for the legalization for recreational reasons. And I even see this happening in Europe and all over the world, where medical cannabis as a discussion, as a safe discussion for people who feel the stigma of the war on drugs, is a safe discussion to have because it's for medical use, right? Who can be against medically helping people, right? So that's one of those things. I think I'm gonna throw on Rick Doblin with so he's gonna talk about the safety of MDMA. If I think Gjalt-Jorn, you said sorry, you have all these Explorer windows over your face. Now you don't. Do you think that? I think you said something like, if people think that MDMA is not so risky, yet there are incidents, right? Wouldn't you agree? There are incidents with MDMA.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
People do have a set view. Oh, okay, so Rick Doblin is going to comment on that.
It has its risks.
Plus.
It's not completely safe. Nothing is completely safe, but it's among the safer psychedelics. It has its risks. It's not completely safe. Nothing is completely safe, but it's among the safer psychedelics. But I would say that there's a distinction between the classic psychedelics like LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, ayahuasca, and MDMA. Pretty clear is that the classic psychedelics are riskier psychologically than MDMA, because MDMA is gentle, it doesn't dissolve your ego, it's reassuring. So it's not as risky psychologically, but physiologically, MDMA increases blood pressure, temperature. People have taken it and overheated at raves and dance settings. People have not drunk enough fluid replacement. Occasionally people drink too much water now and then they die of hyponatremia, about diluting your blood vessels, your blood, and so the risks, I would say, are related to blood pressure. That's the main one. It increases your blood pressure, not substantially so. And in view of the tens of millions of people that have taken it, and we don't hear hardly anything ever about heart attacks or anything like that. Yeah. So I think we've succeeded in demonstrating to the FDA and to the European Medicines Agency that the safety profile is in our applications for therapy for PTSD, where we only give it a few times and we give it under direct supervision. So we have an excellent track record of safety.
Okay, that was Rick Dublin. To summarize for you, Gjalt-Jorn, what he said, and you heard this quote maybe before, but he basically says the risk with MDMA is not, he said it's not so much psychologically, but physiologically. So more heart issues, or you're on a dance floor, you're overheating, and other psychedelics don't necessarily have that. So there is a risk, and there, as mothers of children, certain mothers of certain children can attest, some people have not come home after a rave, taking a pill, not knowing what was in there, not knowing how to handle it, not knowing how to not overheat, doing everything wrong, and then there is still the possibility that one doesn't survive an MDMA trip. Do you think, is there any other drug you think right now out there that is comparable to MDMA and yet is legal right now, already in general? Maybe many.
No.
Yeah, I think it has hardly, I think what I'm getting at is it has hardly ever been done before that a drug that was illegal will be made illegal through policy. I think maybe a better question for you is actually, how do you think this model and your work can help other people to sort of launch the discussion or help people who are interested in this field close to themselves? It's a better question.
Well, there are two ways, I think. One is definitely simpler than the second. The first is, because in this approach we try to eliminate personal preferences as much as possible, and we didn't look at effects of models, but we computed the effects of the models based on what we thought the effects of different instruments would be. It's possible to actually change how you define one of those policy models. And it's also possible to change the relative weight of all those outcomes. So one thing people can do is that they can use the app that we created. It's at mdmapolicy.com/app. Yes, mdmapolicy.com/app. Basically, in that app, I can actually show you. I even prepared that.
Well, thank you.
Because I had a feeling this might happen. So in that app, you can define your own policy models. So we could add another scenario, which we call our scenario, or our policy model, or out policy model. Out. And then you can indicate how you think possession should be organized. So you can say, okay, we want user quantity to be legal. We need plain packaging with prevention messaging. We want advertising to be illegal, etc. And then you can look at how that scores compared to the other models that we had. You can also change the weights. So you can also say, well, I think that ideological values are super important. And specifically, it has to be very liberal and not conservative at all. You could say that. User health is not so important. But of course, crime is super important. So then you can see the weights. Yellow means 0, and purple means 1, and everything else in between. And then after you define that for yourself, you can actually look at the results. Now, of course, this is based on the Dutch situation, so this might not be useful to people in other countries, depending on how dissimilar it is. But it is, I think, a useful way to start the discussion. So you can have a group of people, and everybody can decide on their own model and their own weights, and then you can see what the outcomes will be. So that's one way. The second way that's a bit more work is that we created everything openly. So everything is online. So that's in principle, you can just repeat the whole exercise if you manage to get a team of experts together. And
then with your own team of experts, do the same thing about any type of drug, maybe in your own specific, wherever you are, in your country, exactly. In your environment, in your state. And interesting. So what was the URL again?
Basically, mdmapolicy.com/results brings you to a page that has all these other links. So
everything.
That's also links to the paper. It links to the to the app.
Awesome.
Everything.
Well, thanks a lot, Gjalt-Jorn. I think people. I'm gonna open it up for questions, and I saw some discussions about ketamine. I want to say something about that, maybe. Your dog needs to go outside, so I kind of want to let you go soon as well. So I will do. So if people have questions for Gjalt-Jorn, you can ask them now. We'll do one question, I think, for you, and then I still have some stuff to go through, like the documentary about Southeast Asia and when that's coming out. So let's see. One of the interesting comments I saw here was that Ndma says that sadly, MDMA is only nice once a year, and I know what he's hinting at. So if you use MDMA too much, I had it myself when I was younger. I think I used it 3 times in a row within like a month or two, or 1 or 2. And I think that the sort of like the happiness that it gave me the first time around with my friends, and it was such a good bonding experience and such an epic night, so to speak, was there. But then by the third time I was doing it, I was trying to reach that sort of same level of happiness as the first time, and it just felt artificial to me. I'm not sure if that's something that you can relate to, but I think that that's why it's sad that it's only once a year. I think that when it comes to policy, I think it's actually, this is the reality of how MDMA is being used, right? You've looked at so much data in your life about drug use. This is what I came across, right? That this is generally how people use MDMA. Is that not? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like the average number of times a year is 8, but that's because there are some people who do use a lot, but most people use only 1, 2, 3 times a year.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. So you say the average is 8 for the people who have used it last year? That's still fairly high.
But that's because it's a skewed distribution. So most people use only very little, but you only need a few people who use every week to get a high average.
And they do exist. They
do exist, definitely. I think that in terms of the risks of MDMA, most incidents we see in the Netherlands, I would assume, are mostly in the group who use frequently, who use a lot when they use, and who combine a lot with other substances, which is definitely not a representative group. No,
exactly. So I think, Ndma, we're with you. In general, we are with you. I'll just read a couple of these. We have close to 30 people watching. I have DJ Static says, I haven't done any drugs in over a year, except weed. I used to roll every weekend. Every roll was just as magical as the last, but ketamine was the drug to end all drug use. To be honest, anyone who has an incident went way overboard. Yeah, I think ketamine is such a weird. Ketamine is an interesting drug because it is legal. It is even by the WHO considered one of the most essential drugs there is in order to give anesthesia to people and to keep them breathing. So there have been discussions I think in China to make ketamine illegal globally, and then it was the Dutch delegation that prevented that because of all these health considerations. So ketamine is an interesting drug because it's being used recreationally, even though it is a legal drug. It will be hard to come up with a policy for that, right? It's like how do we? To me, that's an open question still. Like, how do you handle these drugs that that you can use recreationally only? Yeah.
But the whole question is kind of based in the assumption that because it is also psychoactive, we need some policy for it. Mm-hmm. I mean, in terms of ketamine, you could also decide, okay, it is legal. We also start regulating production and sale to consumers, and we start focusing on prevention and informing people.
Yeah, one's good. Why not? Why not, actually? That's actually, yeah, that's true. And you can lump them in with the same with these other drugs. That if you have access to these, then why not to these other ones if you know what you're doing and you build in these. I always call them levels of like there's sort of thresholds for information. Like there's all these moments that you have when you sell a drug. You have all these opportunities to tell people about how to use it. Everything from where you buy it to what packaging it comes in, to what is then included in this packaging, to how much of the dose of the pill is. All of this are just simple steps of information that you can get that nudge you in the right direction, right? And right now, you don't have any of that in an illegal market, right?
Yeah,
No.
absolutely.
Okay, I'll see if there's... Yo, my butt hurts has not only a really good username, but says he's also been clean from drugs and a functioning adult for over 4 years now. That's really good. Whatever floats your boat. I think I don't really necessarily like the word clean so much, because I don't think you're dirty when you do use the substance. But I commend that you are in life where you want to be, and that's really great. So that's... keep that going. Then Michelle says, MDMA showed me how to love others, and DMT taught me to love myself. That is a good one. That's a good one. Gjalt-Jorn. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Interesting. And I'll let you go after this one. I'll let you and the dog go after this one. About 3-MMC, the Super Roy asks, what do you think about all the legal designer drugs, like the now pretty popular drug called 3-MMC? And Gjalt-Jorn, I think it's interesting to look at 3-MMC as well. It's kind of independent, right? Your model doesn't necessarily care about what type of drug it is, right? Whether you feed 3-MMC into it or MDMA into it. Is that accurate? I'm thinking that there's so many analogs of all of these different substances now that it is hard to sort of even give them all an individual treatment. To comment on the Dutch situation of 3-MMC, just real quick, is so it's been around for a while. It's being sold legally through web shops, like in so many other places in the world. And now the government wants to make it illegal. I mean, there is no real process that has been gone through at all. There has just been a handful of journalists talking to the parents of people who have had incidents with them. I think one kid died also. And then a phone call. I know how this works because I've worked as a journalist who knows how you build a story like that. Then what you do, the next step is you call the office of the minister, the secretary who's responsible. You ask them, don't you think this is important? Do you have any comments for these parents who just lost a child? And then the government will basically always say, yes, we think this is horrible, we will take some action. And then it will be, they might postpone it to a committee or they'll do something, but the minister will always say, yes, I'm gonna do something in order to end this horrible drug. And in this case, that means, I think they're thinking about making it illegal come spring, I think. Do you have anything to add about the model and designer drugs?
Well, I think this model you can repeat, but you can repeat it for any specific drug. But as you said, it's only useful to the degree that they differ in terms of the impact on crime of the different choices you can make as a policy, or the impact on user health. And if you don't know much about any or most of those, then it won't matter much.
Because there's not that much crime surrounding designer drugs. That's actually the great thing about it, because they're all legally produced or in the shadows maybe. There's no good information that comes with them necessarily. You know, you're still sort of, there's no rules basically. It's a free market. But at least
in terms of designer drugs, it would just already be better if the default response by the government, if something is potentially damaging, would be, let's try to figure out what we should do about it, rather than, oh, we should make it illegal.
Yeah, well, that's a good summary. Yeah, exactly. And all these policy options are then available in your model. So, Gjalt-Jorn Peters from the Open University, and in this specific case, the MDMA Think Tank, MDMA Policy Think Tank. Thanks so much for being with us, and hope to see you in the future. Maybe, who knows?
Thank you for being in the beta.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, I still want to work with you on this. Just quickly, we worked on trying to figure out how many people in the Netherlands have used MDMA, and if we can maybe even say that policy did anything to it. Like, can you say anything about anything the government did? Did it have any results to the amount of people using MDMA in the Netherlands? But the thing is, the way we count people that use MDMA in the Netherlands has changed all the time, and so we don't have good data, right? That's the general sense, right?
Yeah, getting good data on these things is already really super common. But that's a story for another day.
Story for another day, totally. Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Yo, bye. So, thank you, Gjalt-Jorn. And I want to take it over to the chat and tell a bunch of things that I didn't get around to telling yet, and hang around with you guys just a little longer. And let's see. I'm just going through here, you guys. Michelle Migliaggio Rogers, I hope I pronounced that right, says that prescriptions are usually just new addictions. I think that's an interesting take on it. Prescription drugs, of course, can play a big role in people's lives. And when you have a legal and safe supply of it, you know, sometimes you do need that conversation with somebody who's close to you, asking you, telling you how your use is. So that could well help. I would still prefer it over sourcing it from a completely illegal market. So that I think that's the at least it's a step in the right direction, so to speak. Yeah. Yo, my butt hurts. You were talking about painkillers, opiates in this case. I get it. Yeah. Yeah. Aurora Smith, you were asking for the recipe. I'm just trying to figure out which recipe you mean. Perfect MDMA dose. The general rule for this is you take your body weight in kilograms, and you do it times 1 or times 1.5, and that's sort of like a good dose to start off with. That's your average dose. So say let's just say something random, 70, say you're 70 kilos, 70 times 1.5, 105. And I think, so right now there's a lot of, pills are dosed much higher right now, right? If you buy a pill somewhere, it's usually 125 or 150 or 200 or even 250, 240 is common. I think that's really something that has popped up in the illegal market, and that if you would ever legalize MDMA, you could not only make rules for it, but I think people would prefer actually 50 milligrams, 40 milligrams pills, so they can build up. Like, you don't start, some people do, but you generally don't start your evening dinner with downing a bottle of whiskey, right? Or downing half the bottle. Depends on what kind of day it is, I guess. But in general, you know, you take a glass and you take another glass, and if you get too drunk, you can stop, you can hold off. And there's no reason why we should do anything different for MDMA, right? All I'm doing now is just texting my girlfriend that I'm a bit late for dinner. That's just something that I realized. Sorry, guys. Will there be thank you for actually popping in some ideas here in this list. If you want to go ahead and do that now, if you have any ideas about what future videos should be about, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I have been having these discussions on Patreon, over on my Patreon. The link should be in the description. So since I'm still in beta and I'm still trying to figure everything out, I'm setting up this Discord server where we also discuss these stories, ideas, but while we're all setting that up and everybody still has to sign up to Patreon, if you want to, of course, I'd be glad to hear all your ideas here as well, of course. If you ever have anything to add, shoot me a message. I love reading your comments, so it's really, really cool. I don't have an answer to every question, but I do. Read all your comments. last thing I want to say is about the documentary about Southeast Asia. I promised this in a previous video. I can say that this week I'm going to send one out to my Patreon supporters, like a first edition, to sort of see how everything's going. But I think I changed the narrative of this thing a bunch of times. So last year I went to the Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Myanmar, to create all these stories about the war on drugs there. And most of these documentaries keep ballooning and ballooning and ballooning and ballooning. So every time I think like, okay, this is going to be the video, I'm like, so what do I do with the footage I shot of the woman whose son is in jail over weed? What do I do with the Chinese loggers in Cambodia? Like, how do I add it all together? So it seems like it's going to be, the next video that's coming up is probably going to be close to an hour-long documentary about the Philippines and Duterte's drug war. So the working title is Duterte's Drug War, and it dives into the war on drugs in the Philippines and what it is and what the war on drugs is, but it also dives into like what a crazy human being Rodrigo Duterte is, and how media works and how politics works and how the Philippines are a very interesting country. So stay tuned for that. That's my ambition is to finish it all up around Christmas. It's like it's a really big priority right now. Thanks, Griffin, for all the love. Make a video on the effects of MDMA, LSD, psilocybin on depression and anxiety. I will. Thank you for that. We'll focus on MDMA and indeed those psychedelics. I do have to sort of give a shout out to my sponsor then right now, because these videos you can watch. This year I worked on ICPR, the Interdisciplinary Conference on Psychedelics Research, ICPR2020.net, which was really fucking amazing because, you know, we had such an amazing group of people that we set this all up with. It was supposed to be in Haarlem in the Netherlands last April, and then COVID hit and we had to cancel the whole thing, and then we postponed it to September and did the whole thing online. And what's so great is that all those talks are still available. So we have a gigantic database of all the talks that happened, and it's being hosted by the Open Foundation. The Open Foundation is sort of like the Dutch Maps. And they're available if you go to ICPR2020.net, and if you use the coupon code Controlled Substance over there, you get a huge discount. So it's only $29, I think euros, $29 to watch hours. Like you'll have weeks. Weeks. There were 3 stages, so 3 simultaneous talks. Like the talk with Rick Dublin lasted for like 3 hours or something. You'll have weeks to watch the latest science. It's interdisciplinary, which makes it also really worthwhile. So you don't get these sort of tunnel visions from a single field. You get like a whole holistic view on psychedelics, and combined with like the latest results from all the trials that have been happening basically in psychedelic studies. So that was super interesting. So you can go over to ICPR2020.net to check that out. And of course I will keep on publishing about things like that as well. Orange Teslas. Not entirely sure what that was about. I did talk about first principles. I do really love what Elon Musk is doing. I'm a huge space nerd as well. One of the other things I do outside this channel is I have a space podcast in Dutch as well, where we talk about Elon Musk all the time and his rockets and all that stuff. But Orange Teslas. Maybe Gjalt-Jorn had something in his screen, but maybe I would like I've never seen an orange Tesla. That would actually be nice. Skull Servant says, I'm sure there's MDMA in China. I'm 100% sure there's MDMA in China. I think there's a lot of illegal drugs come from China. That's one of the things I ran into. Griffin, if you said that the documentary about Southeast Asia, if that is only available for Patreon, only the preview is for Patreon. So I release early over there to both create some value for the people that follow me on Patreon, and at the same time get feedback on what people liked and what they didn't like. So if you're in a certain tier, you can see that content. Yeah. Oh, Gjalt-Jorn, you're still here. Are you not walking your dog? The orange Teslas are a type of MDMA pill. Thank you. I am so dumb sometimes. It means I've watched too many Tesla videos and haven't seen enough MDMA pills lately. It's a funny conversation. Thanks a lot. And Gjalt-Jorn, since you're here, people really loved your all your base are belong to us posters, so that's also really great. Thank you for all your comments, and thank you for being with us, with Gjalt-Jorn Peters and myself on this live. This is really great. This is the first time I think I upped the technical level of this live show a bit more by inviting an external guest, which is really great. I'm going to evaluate this and see what I can improve next time, to see if I can get some of the technical glitches out, review how it worked with the quotes, if the volume is good. So thank you a lot for following this discussion, and at the same time also being a little bit of a guinea pig for all of this. Who knows who I can talk to in the future this way. I'm so happy that it all kind of works. I will tell you that the backdrop is going to change. This is my office. I'll just quickly show you around, and I'm going to change this whole place up somewhere next week. So that's also going to happen. So next time the backdrop is going to be different. Step by step by step, building out this show, building out the Patreon, building out the channel. And hope to do it with you guys. So thanks a lot. Austin Koyman, yes, you missed it. You missed all of it. However, fear not. You can scroll back and then, it will still be there. This video will still be there. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Gjalt-Jorn, definitely. Thanks, Neebs. Thanks. Thanks, Skull Servant, and especially thanks, Yo. My butt hurts. Yes. Thanks for sticking with me, and see you all next time.